Good afternoon. My name is Ihor Svanenko, and I'm year 3 student at University for the Creative Arts doing my degree in games development. And today I would like to talk to you about sync versus feel, why perfect timing feels wrong in rhythm-based games. A little bit more about me. I'm the creator of Slay the Beat, as I said before, and I'm always been a huge fan of arcade machines, particularly dance stage, Euro stage, and if I will find one in my local arcade, trust and believe I will spend £10 or more on it. I'm also a Just Dance champion, which means at any house party, I'll be the one who will score 5 stars or more on every single song we play. But what is actually Slay the Beat and what makes Slay the Beat unique? Well, Slay the Beat is the game that combines the iconic Dance Dance Revolution mechanic with arrows and the design of feel of Just Dance. Every single stage, aka song, in my game has its unique environment, unique character, and on early stages of development when the game was nothing, I was asking my friends and family to play the game and give me their honest feedback. And what they said actually left me a bit confused because after playing the game, they would say the audio is perfectly sync, but it still feels off and feels a bit late. And actually, they were right. The audio was perfectly synced, the frame accurate, zero drift, technically flawless, but it still felt like garbage. So today, in 10 minutes, I'm going to explain to you why that happened and what the science actually says and what did I do about it in my game. Really long time developers, including me, thought that it was a hardware problem. Well, the player has a bad TV, bad headphones, bad setup, but what if it's not really a hardware problem? What if precision is always versus the groove? What every rhythm game is aiming for? Obviously, it's a frame, perfect timing, zero latency, and a perfect alignment between audio and input for the player. But it's actually not as straightforward and easy to achieve as it sounds. So now we need to talk about audio latency and the visual latency. So everything affects how your game reacts. So your operation system, the sound card driver, the speaker, they all add delay to audio latency. In total, audio latency is typically in a typical consumer setup could be somewhere between 20 to 80 milliseconds, where visual latency is slightly less, so it's somewhere between 0 and 33 milliseconds, but again, it's all dependent on the refresh rate and the render pipeline. So already before you even written a single line of code, your game already have a combined offset window that can be anywhere between 20 to 100 milliseconds, and it's already messes up your agenda for a zero latency. But player could detect audio latency as small as 19 milliseconds, so it's roughly half of the visual threshold because we see something first before we actually hear it. But now I want to change the way you think about the rhythm based games. So let's keep in mind Brain is always in charge. Brain is the one who actually plays the game. It's not you who is playing it. We do not react to the beats. Brain predicts them. So there's a hypothesis in neuroscience called ASAP, which stands for Action Simulation for Auditory Prediction. I know, sounds scary, but let me explain you. The short version is when you listen to a rhythm, your motor planning system, the part of your brain that's responsible for movement, okay, starts firing much before the actual beat arrives. As you can see on this drawing, so the brain has already reached the point, the audio hasn't reached the brain yet. And all of this cycle sends the prediction back to your auditory cortex, and this is why when you ask someone to tap along the metronome, they consistently tap slightly earlier, not because they bad at rhythm, it's because the brain is designed to anticipate, not to react. And this is quite universal, and it shows around across different cultures, across different skill levels, across different ages. But what does that actually mean for a rhythm based game? Well, when the player presses the button in a game, the brain has already decided when the next beat should have been or will be. The motor system is primed roughly around 50 milliseconds before the expected movement. If the audio arrives after the predicted movement, even by like 20 milliseconds, the player brain registers this as late. So I have little, let's say, pipeline, let's call it a pipeline here, um, that showcases you how our brain reacts to input and latency and what's the perfect window. So if it's a 0 millisecond latency, it's a perfect, the beat is here, you pressed and it registers straight away. Your brain was not ready for this. 0 milliseconds is too fast for your brain to understand why it happened, and it wasn't anticipating it. Remember in the previous slide we talked about anticipation? So brain didn't anticipate the the registration of that movement. On this far right corner here, you can see what's too late. Again, we talked anything beyond 50 milliseconds for a brain feels too late to be registered as that particular input because we already anticipate the next input. So the perfect window is somewhere between 10 to 20 milliseconds. Let's take a look at our competitors. Let's call them competitors. So Dance Dance Revolution aiming between 17 to 20 milliseconds, which is in a perfect window here. You see, feels just right for the brain. How do they achieve that? It's because Dance Dance Revolution uses a wired controller which shoots straight into the system, and it has really low latency. So you know the dance mats, the huge metal dance mats for Dance Dance Revolution or any dance arcades, they are wired into the system, and that's how they achieve such a low latency. The games like Just Dance, on the other hand, their latency could be up to 200 milliseconds, which is in a window of too late. But let's find out why it's too late. Well, Ubisoft never actually published any sort of papers on how late their game are. However, I found an academic study called Switch Just Dance Benchmarking Whole Body Motion Tracking Controller from November 2025, which used the game to train robotics and technically gives the community and developers like me a breakdown on how accurate their game is. So Just Dance can be played in the different ways. I'm just going to talk about two distinctive way of playing. So there's a controller and there's a phone. So controller, because it's a Bluetooth usually connection. For example, let's talk about Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. They are pull-in rate latency is on average between 10 to 15 milliseconds, which is generally considered the most precise and stable input for the modern Just Dance titles, and it sits in this perfect just right window. But often, mostly around 60% of the players are using their smartphones and Just Dance controller app, which relies on the Wi-Fi routing, which is could be great. Again, with Wi-Fi controller, we can achieve between 15 to 25 millisecond latency. However, if the internet is weak, if there's way too many people connected to the same game session, that could spike between 50 to over 100 milliseconds latency. And in the previous slide, we talked for brain anything beyond 50 milliseconds considered late because we already anticipate the next move. So if that move has arrived, it feels late because we already anticipated the next one. So that's why Just Dance has never been a perfect, like a rhythm-based game title. It has always been slightly off from its competitors because it was never aiming for a perfect timing and a perfect rhythm game. But enough with this science talk for today. Let me explain you how I achieve this perfect frame timing in my game. The secret sauce I've used is that I stopped relying on the frame rates. Instead, a node, let me just remind you what a node is. The node is the arrow that goes up the screen to a registration point. Okay? So its physical position on the screen is strictly connected to audio settings.dsp time. What is the DSP time? Well, DSP time is the most precise internal timer on the computer, which is wired directly to a sound card. Because I use this time driven architecture, I unlock some massive advantages. For example, imagine player's PC lags for just like a sudden lag and it freezes for half a second. In the standard game, the moving object would be left behind. But in my system, the music keeps playing, and on the very next frame, our mass simply calculates the audio is exactly zero point 0.5 seconds late. So, therefore, the node belongs right here. So it would teleport the node where it's supposed to be. And in that way, we wouldn't mess up with the brain anticipation of the next node. So the sync is never broken. Obviously, I also added auto adjustment for the player. So there's a sliders in the game in the settings where a player can adjust how many nodes do they want to see on the screen, because I know every TV and monitor is different and some of them might introduce a bit of a display lag. So they need to know what the visual offset is, and they are more than welcome to modify visual offset in my game, as well as dynamic scrolling and speed modifying. So again, those values are open in my game, so players can change them in the settings, and that means they can change how fast the nodes will span and move towards the arrows. So for example, if they actually want more of a chill game, they can decrease the slider and nodes will actually move much slower to a registration point, or they can bump it up and make it a whole in butterfly DDR experience where a hell lot of arrows fly to you at once. It's again, I'm giving the players a freedom to modify the game they want to and achieve this perfect time between 10 to 20 milliseconds perfect timing, where the brain was anticipating and was ready for the arrow and would send the person that satisfaction of them pressing the node on time. And that will conclude my today's presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. It wasn't way too boring, and you learned something new about the way our brain works and the way rhythm-based games handle latency and how it's important to research and listen to your players' feedback. Because if I would never receive the feedback, I would never knew how to improve my game. See you later.